14-hour broadcast. We're talking Gaelic football for the next 50 minutes or so. Kieran Donaghy is here, Tommy Rooney is here.
Hello.
As you're very welcome. The decade of the dubs, I think, is what we're reflecting in. Also, you know, the decade of Jimmy's winning matches, the decade of Mayo coming close again, and the decade of Cork and Kerry getting an All-Ireland each. So it's a bit more of a mixed bag than just the decade of the dubs, I think it's fair to say, Kieran.
Yeah, there's, you know, the obvious thing that stands out is the last 5 years and the 5 in a row, which is unbelievable achievement. But before that, it was a bit. Kerry got one, Dublin got one, Donaghy got one, Dublin got one again, Kerry got one. It was a mixed start to the decade, but certainly the end of it was completely dominated by Dublin. Even though teams pushed them very close here and there, they were able to always find a way to win those tight games, which is, you know, a lot of credit has to go to, I would say, their management and their preparation to get over the line, a lot of them, as well as the skill set of the players and the mentality of them.
Not having the best goalkeeper of all time didn't do much harm either. We're going to have Ciara Trant of the Dublin women's team with us a little bit later on to discuss the theme of goalkeeping. We want to start with 2009, 2010, that sort of winter here. I'm not sure how much you kind of specifically remember that, Kieran, or like from our perspective, looking at the outside looking in at inter-county teams, they're far less advanced than where they are now. This has been a decade of evolution, quicker than perhaps any other decade that I can remember anyway, that people thought about football in a very different way in Gaelic football from a coaching perspective at the end of 2009.
Yeah, it always kind of feels like that now because it's the most, but I would say from, you know, if you look at 98 and 99 to where it was in 2009,
True.
there was a big change. Like in 2009, Kerry were after winning another All-Ireland, their fifth of that decade. They'd been in 8 finals. You know, everything was looking rosy in the garden from a Kerry point of view. We were out in New York and Miami on our Kerry team holiday, and you know, we felt pretty good about ourselves. We felt pretty strong. Then
you had a pretty young squad even back then. A lot young, but you're in the prime. A lot of
we
you
were
in
the prime, yeah, and that's where I think Dublin have an advantage maybe on us where they are now compared to where we were. We were certainly a lot of fellas in our prime, but we had Darragh O'Shea retiring, Mike McCarthy retiring again, another group of kind of guys pushing on in years. Tommy Walsh and Tig left for Australia. And 2010 all of a sudden became a much bigger challenge, and you know, I think there is definitely an advantage that where Dublin are at the moment, where their core group of players, certainly the guys that were on the pitch last year in that All-Ireland final, are still awfully young. So you know, I think this early part of the decade coming on, I think will still be a very dominant Dublin with Kerry trying to push and make that breakthrough, kind of like Dublin did against us in 2011. I think it's going to need that type of a game. We were still better than Dublin in 2011 as a team, but they pushed through that day. They got the breaks. They made the big plays when the game was on the line, and they got that win. And I think that win really kind of copper fastened their belief, and these young players now coming through had the taste of victory. They could smell blood. They could smell us getting older a bit. And they really ratcheted it up, and I think that's where this next decade is going to be fascinating. That I think it is going to be a decade of Kerry and Dublin, if I'm being honest, and that's not, you know, unfortunately, it'd be great to say that there's loads of teams that I think that can break through and challenge this Dublin team, but you know, I really do think Kerry are probably best place to do that.
In fairness, though, the 90s is really the only decade where it wasn't Kerry and Dublin.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah.
That's the first one since the 60s, really, when Galway had that great team. The 90s was amazing. Hurling and football, where in both codes you really couldn't predict what would happen in any given year, whereas I think we're kind of more in a concrete scenario now. Like, it's interesting thinking about that, actually, when you talk about the start of a decade. Like, we will get into, we're going to look into our crystal ball a little bit later on as to what's actually going to happen over the next 10 years, but like 2011 and 2012, like the teams you lost to in those 2 years, they're fascinating to actually study. That Gilroy Dublin team, and obviously that Jim McGuinness Donegal team the following year, in terms of what they exemplified on a coaching level. Because I think obviously, I think he's one of those coaches now at this stage, Pat Gilroy, where he's so unheralded that he is very well heralded at the moment, that he's given so much credit for what happened in 2011. Like, what did you see as a player there? Did you kind of see that there was teams that were better coached, or is that very unfair on what Jack O'Connor was doing?
Yeah, it probably is unfair to what Jack O'Connor was doing, but I think there was certainly, you know, the whole game is evolving as well, you know, and you have to evolve with it as management teams. And Jack was in his second stint with us, and I remember a famous argument we had over in Killarney about me looking for he wanted to kind of, before the 11 final, he wanted all cards thrown on the table, and I was saying that we should do more scenario-based training. Like, you know, we needed to get somebody in and do the scoreboard, we needed to time certain things, we needed to challenge the A team maybe. I think up until then it was very much A versus B game was picked, the ball was thrown in, the score may have been kept, but more often than not the A team would always have the slight edge on the B team, and our decision making, our adapting to very unique circumstances wasn't thrown at us too much. And I think when you look at what Dublin and Jim McGuinness did is, you know, adapting to that type of scenario about, you know, being up, like we were up 4 points with 7 or 8 minutes to go. I'm sure that if we'd have worked on that maybe more, no, look, there was very mitigating circumstances in that game to how it turned around. You know, there was you know, just mad things happened in that last number of minutes that maybe you could never plan for. But I think being in the situation a lot of times does prepare you how to maybe make certain decisions, how to know how to see off a game a bit better. We always had a natural way to see off a game, but you know, I think coaching has certainly, where this Dublin team have taken it to, and I think Jim McGuinness had a certain mantra on how he went and approached and attacked games. But I think definitely this Dublin team would have done an awful lot of work on that scenario-based training, and no more so than the way it was summed up this year when they're losing, they're in extra time. If they hadn't prepared for that, there's probably panic sets in and they lose the 5 in a row, much like Kerry did in 1982. But
they had the blueprint.
Well, James McCarthy, you know, goes in and calls Stephen Cluxton out to full back to pick up Tommy Walsh so he can go out and Paul Ganey. They're a man down so they can go and match up evenly around the pitch. You know, they got him out one side of the pitch. Dean Rock runs over and takes out Shane Ryan so they can't go back across the pitch. Funnel them up, you know, make the pitch a half a pitch rather than a full-size pitch when you're trying to get the ball back. And it would shock me that if guys just came up with that out of the blue. Like, they're a very smart team. This Dublin players are very much talented up here as they are with their skill sets. And I would say that they did have that planned, that if they were ever in the scenario, and I would say worked on a lot in training and talked about in meetings, and you know, that's when you can go to something and that's when you can believe in something, because they've probably gone to that in training before. Certain training games, 5-minute scenario games, look, you're losing by 2 points, you're a man down, what do you do? You have to take risks. I prefer to lose by 5 than lose by 1 or 2.
It's something that Liverpool have been doing over the last couple of months. I know it's probably something that a lot of Premier League teams are doing, but it's getting lauded quite a bit. Like, it came out in an Athletic piece recently that Jurgen Klopp is like coaching his team to be 2 men down, 2 goals down, 10 minutes to equalise, and we're seeing the results now on the pitch, obviously, with them. And obviously that sort of situational football was clearly being coached in these Donegal and Dublin teams. Yeah,
I would imagine so. Again, I don't know, but I would say so. No, the Donegal one was a bit easier. Jimmy got them all back at the start. You know, the blanket, he made the blanket even worse early on in the decade. That famous game in 2011, I remember watching it at home, getting ready, kind of, you know, seeing who would be playing in a possible final, and kind of going, you know, like, this is going to be sick to play against. That's what I was thinking, going against that Donegal team. They'd held Dublin, was 5-5 or something with 55 minutes gone, and it was just like, this is going to be painful in an All-Ireland final. Like, you know,
it was tough to watch. I was at the Donegal Kildare game that year, the Kevin Cassidy point.
Yeah.
Now, I say that, I heard the Kevin Cassidy point on the radio on the way home. I was going back to Roscommon with my cousin. We went to watch the Roscommon Armagh minor game that year. Great game, really exciting stuff, loads of future stars and show. Then the Kildare Donegal game started and we were just like, we're not staying for this. And we missed one of that's one of my iconic moments of the decade, Kevin Cassidy's point. That propelled them onwards.
Yeah, they gave them massive belief. They were, but look, you know, it was, again, like, it was situational for Jim. He knew that Dublin had these great players, the Brogans, the Connollys at the time, and, you know, it was very much of, okay, let's break this down to brass tacks. I don't have the players that can handle these fellas in a one-on-one situation, so what we're going to do is just absolutely turn it into a dogfight. And what he did in 2012, to give him huge credit, is...
They moved on.
Yeah, he kind of goes, okay, well, we've got kind of this bit sorted now. We're a bit over the top with it, but at least teams will be wary of that now. So now we'll try and figure out, how do we use McBrearty, how do we use McFadden, how do we use Murphy in an attacking sense. And then they unearthed gems like the two McHughes who could break from, and they worked on all that with their defenders. All the defenders became better at getting the ball from their own 30-metre line up to the middle of the field, 65, to then kick it into these guys that could do damage. And McFadden, like Donegal, yes, they had the defensive system, but there's no way they're ever winning in All Ireland without McFadden and McBrearty and Murphy. They were like, you could have another team that could play the blanket and get everybody back, but if you don't have those like really brilliant players, attacking players, you're not going to win in All Ireland, and that's why Donegal got that at All Ireland. As much as the McGee's and Paddy McGrath's and Frank McGlynn's and Cassidy's and these fellas who was ultimately very unlucky to miss out in All Ireland, probably deserved one, but him and that cohort of the defensive players were kind of lauded, but it was
system.
It was the system to get it up to the guys that Jim McGuinness and his management team have to get huge credit for what they did in 2012.
I might have jumped onto the Donegal stuff a bit too early here, but Jim McGuinness built this system. He knew what he was doing with that squad. He had the players to work with. Maybe he had a couple of exceptional talents like Michael Murphy and Mike McBurty. But the problem with the Donegal of 2011 was the copycat culture in the GAA and the amount of club teams that are affected for about 5 years after that. Now, I have to say, there's a lot of managers in the country now that are well fit to kind of execute that game plan and make the advanced level that Jim McGuinness brought it to in 2012 to win the All-Ireland. They're probably doing that more now. But like, maybe Fermanagh or the last team we were to see playing like that recently, maybe in the last couple of years, I don't know. But it was very bad for a couple of years. Gaelic football was tough to watch for a long time this decade.
Yeah, it was. It was really until kind of, this Dublin team with the players they have showed that, but again, it's easier to do it with the Dublin team when you have all these Rolls Royces around the place to go out and just play football and make it look good again. But when you're trying to win, and it's become such a results oriented business, the GAA, which is forces teams, like Brawley and Spillane loved the great game and play it lovely, but there wasn't the scrutiny that there is on players or management that there was 30 years ago when teams could go out and just play football, and if they lost by 7 or 8 points, it might be in the paper on Sunday and that was it. Whereas now, it's all over Twitter that night, the following day, the local papers, the national papers, managers are getting it in the ear, everybody has an opinion, everybody can voice that opinion now. It's much more, the pressure on managers and players to try and get results now is making the game, I would say, tough for a lot of teams in kind of like the Division 3, Division 4 level, because they work so hard all year. Inevitably, their year ends up in maybe getting a hiding somewhere, and it's making it very tough, I think, for the so-called weaker counties, if that's what you want to call them, and why I was a big advocate of, if it was done right, if it was marketed right, if it's given massive preference on All-Ireland final day, that this Tier 2 championship game final is on the same day as the All-Ireland final, and I don't want to hear anything about, we have to make sure that the Sam Maguire gets so many tickets, and Corporate gets so many tickets. It's going to have to be a kind of festival of football for those 4 teams. It can't be just 5,000 tickets for the minors here and 5,000 tickets for the minors. They're going to have to figure out a way to get more people from those counties in if it's going to be on the biggest day, because that's what the players deserve, and I think that's what the players can really strive for if they're going to be in a Tier 2 championship, that final is on the biggest day, not another day, that day. And I think that would be something that would allow teams to have, that light at the end of the tunnel about getting onto the biggest day of the calendar and being able to perform inside with a lot of people inside in Croke Park.
How big, in comparison to 10 years ago, is the need now, and not just the need, the inevitability of the Tier 2 championship? Like, I guess it's kind of like a tween ocean. The kind of further you move away from something, the better it seems in the rear view mirror. But it definitely didn't seem that the disconnect between, say, Division 1 and 4, I know there's always going to be a disconnect, was as big 10 years ago. It just seems, because of the reasons we're talking about, the advanced nature of some of the top counties, the rich have certainly got richer over the last 10 years, and I guess we are going to see it now next year with the Tier 2 championship. Yeah,
it's, sport is cruel, and when you're finishing up your year on the back of a hiding, it's just there's not a realistic chance that a Division 3 or Division 4 team in my eyes can go win the Sam Maguire. They might want.
Almost got knocked out by Sligo and Antrim 10 years ago.
Yeah, but that was still at quarter final or last 16 stage. But are they going to go on? Were they going to go on and beat a Tyrone or whoever that year that was in the final, or that great Cork team? Were they going to go on and do that? And that's the bit where it's just so hard. They might want to dream of winning the All-Ireland, and that's fine, and everybody's allowed to dream, but if I was a player, you know, I'd much prefer a chance of actually being able to realistically win something, finish the year on a high note, and look to go on and challenge myself against the bigger teams in the Sam Maguire the following year with a year of belief and a trophy behind me, and something, that trophy and that medal is I've something in the bank, rather than just finishing every year on a sour note. And I think it's hard for guys to, you know, and there's, you know, the real heroes of the GEA are these guys that keep coming back from that and keep delivering for their county and keep going to the well for them.
Can I ask you both, like you mentioned there, Tommy, the idea that because of what was happening with Donegal at the time, it became en vogue to play in a certain manner, to bring bodies behind the ball, and regardless of the tools you had at your disposal, that was the way to play football at the time. What is the way to play football at the moment? What's trendy at the moment for club coaches, for coaches even at inter-county level?
Well, bring Kieran Donaghy back, the attacking markers in town. I don't know. Sweeper was the buzzword for how many years? Did the sweeper infect Kerry for 4 or 5 years? I know Paul Murphy became the man.
I think every team knows. I don't think there's any one sweeper. I think certain games, if a team plays a guy back against you, you will say, well, who's our best guy that we can free up to play sweeper when we don't have the ball, but then who's also very good on the ball. I don't think you can get away with just, you know, having a guy sitting back there. You know, this guy that's sitting back there has to become an offensive weapon when you come up the pitch. You know, I think every team is, the way the game is certainly being played now, and Dublin have done this. You know, you see Mannion running 90 yards, tackling fellas back the pitch. It's, you know, it really is 15 defenders, 15 attackers, and, you know, it's Dublin where everybody is defensive as anybody else, but what they had is just, you know, like absolute class players that were able to go. If you look at the likes of McCarthy, Johnny Cooper, Merchant, John Small, guys that were able to just bring the ball up the pitch after that defensive side, and then you're able to leave your 2 or 3 top class guys in position, and then your guys coming off them. So you see with Dublin so much is guys carry it out, bring it up the pitch, they kick it into somebody. But James McCarthy always has the legs of, even though he's run 40 yards, to kick it into a corner forward who's come out, he will go again, and you're going to have to be able to do that 90-metre tank run with him. Because if you don't, the Dublin team now, certainly under Jim Gavin, and will always make the right decision for Dublin and for the team, and that's a huge part of so it really is, you know, I think every team now is there's an onus on you to track your man. So if you're full forward and your full back goes, you got to track him. That means you end up back in the half back line, and teams are certainly using that, since Dublin did that in 2015 to Kerry, where they brought James and Gooch up the pitch. I think teams looked at that and said, okay, well, if we've got a very good corner forward that you're marking, can you also try and drag him up the pitch? So there's that definitely. It's a real. You have to be able to do a bit of everything in every position now. There's gone with the days that
it's become more of a skills-based game, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Like your cornerback has to be able to soul up the field and kick a point. Like Mark Shea was a phenom for years, because he's this cornerback come up and drop dummy solos and kick it over with his left leg. It would be a requisite now with most cornerbacks that they can cause a damage, like a Tom Sullivan with a Kerry, or an Owen Merchant, or even Johnny Cooper this year, who isn't the most natural footballer, but when given free rein, when Kerry played the sweeper in the replay, Johnny Cooper became an effective weapon for Dublin. He was kept it very simple, but he exploited the space when it was there. He got it up to the areas, he minded the ball, he had no turnovers, he made the right decisions, and every once in a while he made a little insertive run that panics people to go towards the ball, and then he can slip it off to guys to kick points. So
great example of that is Philip McMahon, the 2016 All-Ireland football semi-final replay against Mayo. 1-2 from play, marking Aidan O'Shea. All the talk was about marking Aidan O'Shea that day, and he kicked 1-2 from play.
And the 15 final obviously as well. Philly.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to get into, like, we've done the discussion over the last couple of weeks about the team of the decade, but I'm keen to get your opinion on, like, who is the best cornerback or fullback, somebody along 2, 3 or 4 that played football this decade, because I find when we go through our teams of the decade, that is the one position where people are like Keith Higgins and then 2 others, and you might go for Keith Higgins yourself, but I'm keen to know who was the best of those dubs that you came up against.
I think Keith Higgins has to be in there.
Yeah.
Just for his longevity, like, you know, he came along in 2005, and he's still earmarked to pick up the most dangerous weapons for the opposition in his latter years, like, you know. Philly has to be there, Johnny Cooper has to be there, Rory O'Carroll was there for a while.
Yeah, you only picked 2. You only got 2 more positions here.
I would actually have Neil McGee.
Neil McGee.
I would have
At
Neil
3.
at 3, yeah. Yeah, they've Neil McGee, and I'd probably have Johnny Cooper at 2. And
Johnny over Philly.
And Higgins at 4, yeah.
Okay.
What was it about Neil McGee?
I think the beauty of McGee is just he's just an all-round nightmare. He had the strength, he had the power. He was able to talk the talk. He was able to walk the walk. He was power packed, really. Like, you know, he could go up the field and kick a score. He was great man off the pitch. We did a good international rules tour where we got to know him.
Where did you go? That was obviously in
Australia in 2011.
Oh,
yeah.
11, sorry, way back.
Yeah, so you get to know the guy too, and
were you rooming together?
Hard as nails. Yeah, we spent a bit of time together. Yeah.
Is that the trip of Big Joe? No.
No, that was 08.
That was 08. Okay.
And like, what was the international rules 2011? Is that like more downtime than actually focus on the matches?
Well, we won so convincingly the first day that it ended up being a lot more downtime.
And what were you getting up to in the downtime?
Oh, plenty of drinking and having the crack and enjoying being in Australia when you know you're going to win the second game and win the series. But McGee was a gas man. We were at it one day early mornings down in Melbourne. He landed on at about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning with a tray of tequilas. Like, do you know what I mean? It's just not the way to start off the morning.
No, it absolutely is the way to start off.
Well, not when you've been probably after about 4 hours sleep and you kind of woke up and you kind of went for one kind of nice pint to maybe settle you in and ease you into the day. The Australian sun is no place for tequila, I can tell you. It threw a lot of fellas off that morning. But no, like him as a fullback, where he'd be dominant in the air. He could mark the James Donaghy's. He could mark bigger guys, Aidan O'Shea, Michael Murphy, I'm sure he would have got great training with Michael Murphy inside in training of how to deal with bigger players. But he could mark the small fellas too. He could bomb up the pitch. He was as hard as nails. He'd go through you. He'd hurt you without even really trying to hurt you. He was that kind of guy. But yeah, he would be my 3. If Rory or Carl probably stayed around a bit, you know, if he didn't go away and lose out of touch, he was really strong as well as out and out fullbacks. I think Philly and Keith Higgins, Mark O'Shea, Johnny Cooper, they all had stints at fullback. Keane O'Sullivan all had stints at fullback, weren't out and out natural fullbacks. And I think the 2 natural fullbacks at the time were Neil McGee and Rory O'Carroll. Like,
what is the natural fullback? It seems to me the toughest position on the pitch to play at the moment.
Yeah, if you're good and tight and and aggressive,
you have to attack the ball, especially this year with the new mark. You've got to attack the ball.
Oh, you've got to attack the ball now. Yeah, you've got to be tight all the time. But you know, I don't know if it's the hardest position on the pitch to play.
Do you not think so? I think that there's always kind of like a question mark around that position, because you've listed off a lot of players there, even with the Dubs, with Kerry, you're like, who's the full back? And I think that's as a result of what the position is, rather than a dearth of options.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Trying to find a fella that's a complete natural fullback is probably a guy that's played fullback all the way up.
There's probably a number of styles of full forward these days as well.
That's true.
Which, you know, horse for courses, who you're going to put marking who.
But I think that's where I think the natural fullbacks. That's what the natural fullback is that he can take anyone. He can take anyone. I think McGee could, and I think O'Carroll too was tough and nasty enough to deal with a small fella, that he'd be strong enough for him. He was pacey, O'Carroll, for a bigger type of guy. But yeah, I think that really sums it up. If you can be that guy that can do mark the board and makes you a natural fullback in my eyes.
Just to finish up on the section of Donaghy here, they won All Ireland this decade. Was that a good achievement? Like, did they deserve more?
If you hadn't picked Durkin's pocket that time, could have been 2.
Yeah, they could have got 2, and you know, they were always threatening in those 4 years under McGuinness.
Was it 5 Ulster titles? Was it 4? I think it was 4 or 5 Ulster titles in that time.
Yeah,
I have it here somewhere. Give me a second.
Yeah, I think
you know, against
they were certainly
they were certainly
they were certainly dominant, the dominant team of the decade in Ulster. Really, if you were to look at it, you know, I know Monaghan were really good as well.
Yeah,
Tyrone were always sniffing around the place, but Derry didn't rattle anything. Down, that great Down team that got to the All Ireland 2010, kind of.
Derry and Down were good at the start of the decade.
They dropped really quickly.
They did, yeah.
I think they were both kind of 08, 09, or 10 teams rather than the early part of the decade. But you know, Donegal won All Ireland. Look, an All Ireland is an All Ireland, and I'm sure, you know, there's other teams out there would love to have got that one All-Ireland in the decade, and Donegal managed to get that, and we're probably unlucky, to a degree against us in 14 when McFadden fist that one off the post in the last minute.
2 minutes.
That would have been an equaliser that day, and who knows what a replay would have shown up. Would Jim McGuinness have had time to deal with Eamon's kind of what Eamon did that day, which was kind of a bit on Kerry but to tell our halfbacks to not follow their men and get dragged out of position and leave those very dangerous forwards that we talked about a few minutes ago exposed one-on-one up there with our guys. But our older fellas of that team, Mahoney was unbelievable that day, and Murphy really went toe-to-toe, and Mark Shea got the beating of McFadden that day, and them guys were all around in 2002 and 2003 and 4, and for them to be performing like that in 14 was huge for us, because we knew that we needed somebody to mark McFadden and Murphy. And you give that job to two kind of war horses that are going to go and go out there and relish that. And Mahoney relished the battle, and he always did in big finals. He marked Kieran MacDonald out of it. He marked certain guys out of finals that he was given the job to mark. And he always liked to try and kick a score. He tried to kick a score that day too against Donegal, and it screwed into me, and I caught it and passed it over the bar. He still maintains it was a pass. There was no more pass than the man in the moon.
Did anyone dare ask you back in 2009 what your prediction for the decade would be in Gaelic football? Have you any idea what you would have said back then?
Have I any idea what I would have said?
Have you got this pulled up somewhere online?
Yeah, I'm waiting now for your quote.
I don't, but we couldn't have seen Dublin coming.
Oh, you could have.
Back in 09?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, absolutely.
The Dublin we saw, if Dublin didn't win the All-Ireland in 2011, they're not winning 5 in a row.
Yeah, but 07, we were really strong in 07, and they pushed us to the pin of our collar in an All-Ireland semi-final.
How many teams have got to that stage and then just dropped off?
Yeah, but they were knocking at the door. 07, 08, 09, 10. They should have won probably. They should have been there in 10 when we were knocked out of it. That should have been their time, and Cork had that amazing comeback against them. So you knew they were coming. You knew they were coming. They had the players. Did we know that they were going to come to this level of the latter part of the decade? No, but certainly in the early part of the decade, you knew Dublin were going to be massive in 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Okay.
But then the younger players came through. I was talking about somebody last night, just when you look at the size of them, how big Conor Callan has got, the size of Kilkenny. There's a picture of James McCarthy in 2011.
I know, the difference. It's unbelievable.
He's turned.
I might get that up for the end of the show. Even
his shoulders are turned in, it's the shape of these guys. Brian Cullen has to get huge. He went to Leinster, he came back into Dublin, and whatever they're doing in the gym has a huge effect on what the way they're able to perform in the pitch. You go through every one of them: Fenton, Kilkenny, James McCarthy, the Smalls, Philly, Johnny Cooper.
Even in the Leinster final this year, not to bring Meath into it, but it was a massive thing for me to get to the Leinster final this year, and fair enough, their first half was, and they had their wides and whatever.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that day for me was looking down from above in the Cusack stand where I was, the physical difference.
Oh.
Cian O'Sullivan hipped two lads, two shoulders, knocked the boys off the ball.
Yeah.
And Meath are playing Division 1 football this year, so they'll get an awakening in terms of the physicality of it. But Dublin have set that tone. Paul Flynn probably embodied it for 4 years.
He did, yeah.
The physicality.
But you look at that probably, if you were to pick a half-forward team of the decade, it's probably Flynn, Kilkenny and Connolly.
Yeah.
And the three of them, size-wise, height, power, shoulders,
athleticism, everything.
Yeah. Physicals. Not only are they these big, huge men, but they've got wheels. They can all move. They can all play the ball. They can kick. They can do a number of roles, and that's what you have to deal with when you're going up against Dublin. And probably why I was a bit worried for Kerry going in this year was that a lot of fellas aren't at that shape yet. But in fairness to Kerry, they really showed up on both days and tried to match that physical side with them as well.
In terms of one, I know we got to move on really quickly. In terms of one obvious change in the 2000s to the 2010s, Dooher and Galvin probably defined the 2010s in terms of wing forwards. And if you look at the difference in size and shape 10 years later, and the manner in which that Kilkenny and Flynn played and Connolly played, it's completely different.
Yeah, I was talking to Bernard Brogan about that recently, and in the 09 final he texted Flynn and he called him and he said to watch the way Galvin was moving and the way he'd work around and his kick passing, and because Flynn was probably the kicking side of his game was letting him down, and then as Brogan said, he just went away and just worked on his kicking and just became this kicker then that could kick points, could kick balls in the outside of the boot, inside of the boot. So it's amazing.
He's spoken about himself and Michael Murphy spending hours upon hours in DCU at St Clair's in 2011, 2012. I think before the two of them won those All-Irelands, and the manner in which they changed the.
But no better man to learn how to kick than Michael Murphy. He's as pure a kicker off his hands and off the ground, obviously, but off his hands in terms of the way he can kick the ball on the outside of the boot. So certainly, again, college football guys learning off each other and taking the game to the next level is a huge part.
For any Dublin fans out there, there's probably been a disappointing lack of the Dubs. We're going to get into the second half of the decade in just a moment.
Has there been a lack of the Dubs?
Well, you can't chat about the decade without the Dubs. We're going to get it fully into the second half of the decade when they won literally every single All-Ireland. But I think just in terms of the most important game of the decade, it's the 2014 All-Ireland semi-final, isn't it? Would you agree with that?
Is the most important game
the most important game of the decade. Does the 5 in a row then happen without that?
Owen has a theory that the Ryan McHugh goal in 2014 is the Seamus Darby moment of the decade because it stopped
the 7 in a row.
7 in a row.
In reverse. Would we not have beaten him in the 14 final?
That's a good point. That's a good question. What you tell me? You tell me.
I don't know.
Surely Rock 17 is the moment of the decade, is the game of the decade.
Well, the thing is, Fitzmaurice obviously would have had a plan for Dublin in 2014, and Dublin would have been less equipped to have a counter plan like they did in 2016, when they dealt with it much better than say they would have done it in a 14 final. So.
But I think you have to look at their 5 in a row and how many times that they were in games where it was level, or they were behind, or they were a point ahead, and they won all of them. That's. They got caught by Donaghy, and that can't be Dublin's fault. That was Jim McGuinness's genius and when I say Jim McGuinness's genius, it always goes with a bit of luck. You can't win these games without a bit of luck, and the bit of luck that Jim McGuinness got that day is Diarmuid Connolly and Paul Finn missed chances.
Oh, but they were so good as well in that first half. They kicked unbelievable scores in that first half.
Rakers,
Unbelievable scores.
Rakers, but the 2 goal chances were the ones that if they'd have got them, it's game over. You never got to see Jim McGuinness's work on these kick-outs, the tap over the top, to suck the Dublin half back line down. Dublin were following them down. After that, then it was a case of, okay, well, we got burned by that. And look, they haven't lost since, which is unbelievable. Yeah,
I would like to see that alternate universe, whatever would have happened in the 14 final. Kerry would have won it.
The Mayo-Dublin rivalries, though, they were the game.
We are going to get to that.
Okay.
We are going to get to that because Mayo obviously such a significant part of the second half of the decade as well. We're focusing on one individual player here. Here is Anthony Moyles chatting about Jack McCaffrey. We've kind of come up with every superlative under the sun for Jack McCaffrey over the last couple of years. He's still only 25 years of age. You have to consider him as the best half-back that Dublin have ever produced at this point. If not, you could go greater to backs in general or players in general at this point.
The guy, he plays the game with there's nothing nasty about him. There's nothing arrogant about him. He does his job. He goes, he flicks the ball over the bar, he turns around, he runs back, and he might even, and he doesn't tap a lad to say, listen, I just did that to you. He actually kind of, I don't know what it is about it. He's a very humble kind of character. But he is absolutely, I'd say he's close to being a top player in the country at the moment. He's definitely in the top 3. And I probably can't see anyone better than him. What he does when he injects that bit of pace, but it's not only even his pace, it's his willingness to work back. He works back and he chases fellas back down and he covers runs and, he goes forward for goals. Then straight away he turns and he's off and he's covering off fellas and he's just, his willingness, his desire, his brain, he doesn't take stupid shots. He gets into areas where he knows his limitations and he looks to offload the ball. He clipped one really bad wide with his right foot and you could kind of see him afterwards, saying, Jesus, I shouldn't have done that kind of thing. But he actually looked for the past 2 or 3 occasions and there was no one there and he ended up kind of clipping it, trying to shoot it over himself and clipped it wide. But he is, he's just unbelievable.
Yeah, Jack McCaffrey being discussed by Anthony Moyles there a little while back. Kieran, I want to chat to you briefly before we get Ciara Trant on the line, just about punditry over the last 10 years. It seems to me that it's been a decade where the voice in the studio has had more of a say in how Gaelic games has gone. Joe Brolly obviously has a big enough impact, obviously featured in one of the most famous post-match speeches as well in 2014, but the Conor McManus foul by Sean Cavan and all that, the way rule changes has been affected by what people have been saying, and obviously it's something that you've got into yourself over the last couple of years. It seems that the voice in the studio has got more powerful.
Has the voice in the studio got more powerful? It's a tough one. I think the boys, like, you know, I think certainly myself and Peter Canavan and Senan inside in Sky try to look at angles on the game and bring stuff to people who are football people who might try and bring that to their own setup. So I think there's a very kind of analytical look to it. I think RT with Bradley, I think people like to watch Bradley. You know, I think they may have got that wrong with him in trying to curtail him fully. I think you know, people like that bit of expression at times, and you know, certainly challenging him to come up with more scientific, you know, or game-specific narrative or approaches that teams are using, having an in-depth look at with the cameras and the stuff that RT have to try and analyse a team. But I think they were kind of, for years, they really relied on Spillane and Bradley to be the wild cards and say anything, and that was good enough. And then I think it very quickly tried to turn around and turn all of these guys into kind of new look at games and kind of approach. And I don't know that suit, and look
Yeah.
it ended up the way it did. But I think certainly, if you ask the general fan, you know, that they would like to see a bit of both, a bit of real talk, a bit of. I think people don't necessarily like going after players. When guys aren't being paid and guys have jobs to go into on Monday morning, I'm always very wary of going after.
Sticking the boot in.
It's sticking the boot in, and I think that was where they were probably guilty at times of going over the top. But a lot of it was, I don't know, was a lot of it pre-planned. I think a lot of it was just emotion. I think the Sean Kavanagh thing was pure emotion on that day, and
that's why we love the GAA as well sometimes, that things come out just off the cuff and things. But obviously, like, there's moments when it went a little bit far. I kind of bring that up because analysis, I think, this decade has just been far more useful for people like me sitting at home, not having a clue what's going on, explaining what's happening in a game. One of those reasons, I think anyway, has been the goalkeeping revolution that we've seen over the last 10 years. And delighted to say that Dublin goalkeeper Ciara Trant is with us on the line. Good morning, Ciara.
Morning.
We've been discussing over the last 45 minutes or so about the evolution of football. The evolution of the goalkeeper is one of those things. What's your view on how the position has changed over the last decade?
Well, it's gone from strength to strength, really. It's been very, very positive in terms of, like, goalkeeper as a position itself, but then the contribution it's made to, I suppose, defensive systems, attacking systems in the game as a whole. Like, you know, a lot of teams use kick-outs and goalkeeper possessions as a platform to attack now, which is fantastic, whereas in the past it was just used as a shot-stopping and a restart kind of method. So it's definitely benefited the game massively.
When did you realise in your own career that you'd have a better chance to be involved with play rather than the person that actually just sits between the posts?
Well, I kind of came to the goalkeeping position a bit late. I didn't always play in goal, so I started maybe 7 or 8 years ago in goal, and that's when, you know, things kind of started to change a bit. And then when I broke onto the senior panel, that's when, so the likes of Cluxton, like you were saying, had an impact in the game in terms of people were analysing his kick-outs, and I suppose that gave goalkeepers kind of an opportunity to, you know, change the way they played and contribute more. So I kind of came into it, you know, as it began to rise, so to speak. And it's, you know, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as I did. You know, being able to contribute to the game more as a goalkeeper has encouraged me and probably kept me in the game more.
Kieran Donaghy here. Well done this year, firstly. And secondly, do you think that it's going to become, in this decade coming forward, that keepers could be involved in, and we've seen little glimpses of it here and there in club games, etc., but that the keeper being the extra man, that there'll be set plays almost, that they might come out one side, players will pull to the other, create 2-on-1s, and that the keeper will become more of an offensive weapon? And on that, do you look at your full-backs maybe having the odd training session with the goalkeepers, that if a goalkeeper goes marauding up the field and happens to lose the ball, that a cornerback might be able to jump in goals to stop that goal going back in if they do turn it over?
I don't see that happening in our setup. If they saw me go off the field, there would be a bit of panic. But you know, I think this year it might. You know, you've the likes of, if you're looking at Niall Morgan and even Rory Beggan and stuff like that. They've been making their way up the field slowly, and it's definitely like there's opportunity there for some sort of plan or a set play, definitely. And I think, you know, if it's not this year that it comes in, it will be definitely the year after. You know, it only takes one team to be caught on the hop, and for a goalkeeper, a system, an attacking system to get success for it to become a nationwide thing. And, you know, I don't know, I haven't seen it in ladies football in the club game, but maybe it's happening in the men's game already. But certainly it is something we're definitely going to see in the future.
I think we'll see Ciara coming out the field next year, bombing over a pint.
It's like I was about to ask you how much analysis do you feel the opposition do of you in your kickouts, but it's probably more apt to actually ask you how much analysis do you do of the opposition goalkeeper in general as a team. How instructive is Mick Bohan in terms of analysing the opposition goalkeeper?
You try to analyse every aspect of an opposition's game and even your own game, and you know, you do spend a lot of time looking at your kickouts and their kickouts. I think, you know, it'd be foolish if you didn't, because you're trying to highlight strengths and weaknesses. I suppose teams do, you know, put a press on our kickouts, and like I have noticed a few times, just kind of having the feeling that they've done some work here, or you know, they've put an emphasis on squeezing our kickouts. Well, you know, it's something we've done in the last couple of seasons as well. And you know, the more respect and the more attention that the goalkeeper's game is getting and the kickouts getting, the more analysis that's going to be done on it.
For sure. Just in an overall sense then, Ciara, on a personal level, on a Dublin level really, it's been quite a decade, I think it's fair to say, because I don't think many people would have expected the level of Dublin dominance that has actually arrived. Like Kieran was making the point earlier, in the men's game perhaps it was a bit more predictable that it would have happened, but I don't think anybody would have expected Cork to go 3 years without winning an All-Ireland, let alone Dublin to go 3 years in a row winning the All-Ireland. Did you expect this to happen?
I expected a bit of success. You know, there's a group of us that won a lot underage, and even at 21s we dominated for a couple of years. So there was, you know, strong youth kind of group coming through into the senior panel. We lost a lot as well, and you know, when you get to an All-Ireland final, you don't think that you're going to be there the following year and the year after that. You know, we lost 3 in a row, and there's only so many chances that you can get to actually win one. So we knew we were capable. Whether we were going to get over the line or not was another thing. And, you know, thank God we did. And, you know, off the back of losing 3, we've won 3. But to be able to say that Dublin ladies have played in 3 All-Ireland finals, won 3 and lost the other 3 by a kick of a ball.
Yeah.
You know, it's phenomenal. Like there's a lot of people that would give their arm just to play in an All-Ireland final, never mind lose one. So it's been fantastic for the capital. I even, you know, seen it in my own club now. We've over 500 girls playing juvenile football in the club, which is enormous. And, you know, if we didn't have success at county level, I don't think that would have had a knock-on effect in the numbers of girls playing football in Dublin. So it's been massive. You know, what the lads have done has been great. You know, but we've contributed as well, and something we're very, very proud of. But yeah, I don't think anyone can foresee the success that we've had. Yeah,
it's incredible. Like the 500 girls. Like, I'm not sure. Do you recall, say, when you were starting, how many girls would have been playing at weekend mornings? Like, would it have been a quarter of that even?
Oh God! When I was growing up, there was only 2 of us.
Right.
Yeah. So, and now, like, there's a couple of teams every age group.
It's interesting as well that you kind of mentioned that pride that you get from seeing how the sport has grown, I guess, because Mick Bohan was in studio with us a few weeks ago, and he was saying that there was almost a bit of criticism from within the camp after this year's All-Ireland football final, in the sense that the game wasn't a great game, and he felt that as ambassadors for the sport that there was a bit of disappointment that there wasn't a bit more of an exhibition put on. Is that a feeling that you would have shared?
Yeah, we're absolutely gutted. You know, anytime anybody says, you know, oh, you know, congratulations, you know, great success, my response is always, yeah, but it was a terrible match.
Right.
You know, playing in an All-Ireland final, even growing up, you dream of it being this spectacle and this, you know, massive occasion. And we had, you know, the weather obviously contributed a lot, but it was a poor game of football, and it wasn't the spectacle that you kind of want to win an All-Ireland with. And, you know, if it was our first match of the season, you know, we still would have been as disappointed coming off the field. You know, I don't know our stats from the game. I don't know I doubt we hit any of our our key indicators and stuff like that. So it was a massive disappointment. But, you know, I think we can take a lot of pride in that disappointment in terms of, well, you know, that's the standards we're at now and that's how we see the game. We're not just happy to win one. We want to play football. We want to play good football, and every day we go out, we want to, you know, be our best and put on our best show for everyone there, and including ourselves. And yeah, there was massive disappointment in it.
That's incredible, really, but it's an unbelievable attitude to have. Ciara, listen, congratulations once again on all the success this year, and thanks a million for taking the call this morning.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Dublin goalkeeper Ciara Trant there on the line. That's insane, isn't it? That's after an All-Ireland final, they have the disappointment, but like that is an acute awareness of how brilliant ambassadors they've been for the...
Well, it's better to win a bad one than lose a good one.
Well, that's for sure. That's for sure. What's the worst one you won?
Worst one I won. I probably looked the hardest one was the Donaghy one, because it was, you know, people were giving out about it afterwards, but like it was, what was it, 112 to 14 points or something. It wasn't bad, but it was a lovely day. You know, it could have been a better game. But
was that the highlight of your decade? Even if
for me,
yeah, like I presume that nothing as a spectator could possibly come close to the playing section of your career.
Yeah, no, the highlight would be actually the Gaelic grounds for me. Just that's because I never thought, you know, I thought my career was kind of over to. In a way, a few weeks before that, and then I was back in full forward. We were putting high ball in again. It was something that was gone for a few years. If truth be told, it turned into possession game in this decade, which would, I'd say, be the biggest thing. Back in the day, you'd Armagh, you know, you'd certain teams that would loft ball in, you know, and hope for the best. And if you 5 went in and you won 2 of them and got 1-1, it was seen as great. Whereas I think the turnover became a huge thing statistically for guys out the pitch, that they were almost, you know, turnovers was a bad thing against their name. So putting in a 50-50 ball into full forward, high, diagonal, there's a lot that can go wrong with that. And is that going down as a turner? I remember pleading with the stats guys to tell our guys that if you put a ball in at the right angle and the right height and I don't get it, put the turnover down on me. Like, don't put it down on the kicker, because it was the right thing to do. You know, because if I catch that, there's a goal chance on then.
And did they actually give you a turnover?
I don't know. Did they ever? I don't know. Did we ever actually? Was it ever? I was at a time where I knew that the high ball was going out of the game.
Sure.
And obviously, me as an exponent to that, I was not probably trying to stay relative, but I knew that it was a dangerous weapon for me, and that it was an easier way to get a goal. You know, there's the hard ways to work a goal, but putting in a high ball, a fella catching it, a guy coming off him, can get you a lot of easy goals. Like we would have a lot of joy in training with them. But so, you know, trying to just kind of get that going. But I remember that going into that 14 game against Mayo, where it was kind of, it was do or die, shit or bust time for me, really, and high ball being put back in and trying to win them, and the pressure of all that, and then obviously look, the game was just was an epic game of football from both sides. So it was that would be mine personally. And
just to finish up then, 10 years down the line, what do you think we'll be talking about? This, like, very much what we're talking about is, as I said at the top of the decade of the Dubs. That's what it's been. I think it's fair to say. What do you think is going to be the one thing that really sticks out?
Yeah, I think the start of this decade is going to be, you know, I'm not sure if we're going to see much different. You know, Kerry will be knocking, but you know, they still have a lot to learn. This year will stand to them an awful lot. Jim going, will that have an effect on them? You know, how long will Stephen Cluxton play? Will that have an effect on them? They're certainly going to lose a lot of experience. But as I said, the team that was out in the pitch for the All-Ireland final for Dublin this year isn't going anywhere. Their players are going to be around for a good few years yet. So they're going to be a real challenge. But, you know, Kerry have had a lot of success with the minors. I think, you know, it's going to be a decade of King Khan versus David Clifford, and, you know, this Kerry versus Dublin rivalry is going to go into overdrive. And I think the 2 finals we got this year, there won't be many people that will be disappointed with that. But, you know, it's going to throw up a lot of good things. We're going to have the Tier 2 championship. Hopefully, if that's marketed right and done right, that becomes a success. I think that has to be a key aspect for the GEA, that they get this right. That we can't have another, you know, what it was when they tried to bring it in the last time. It has to be bigger than that. The rule changes will be good. I think it'll bring a bit of excitement. I do think we still need to look at the black card rule. I just don't think it's going to. I think fellas will be happy to take black card or sin bins. Sorry, I think fellas will be happy to take sin bins at the end of games. It won't really matter if you're winning by 3 points. The manager will still be roaring, take him down. And I think until we take that out of our game, there's always going to be that level of frustration later on in GAA games. But no, look, it's I'd be a very positive guy, and I think the way Dublin have played the last number of years, the teams will try and kind of follow that, and it'll be up to teams to try and get up to the level of Kerry and Dublin, and there will be teams that will come and have a go at that.
Let's hope so. I don't think anybody will be complaining if Sam Maguire gets passed around a little bit more in the next decade. Kieran, thanks a million for popping in this morning. Very happy Christmas.
Yeah, you too.
Plenty to look forward to in 2020. We'll chat to you in studio no doubt very shortly.
Yes.